Welcome to the broadcast. We'll get started in just a moment. Until then, please enjoy some music.
Now, artificial intelligence can generate ad creatives automatically. The program is called Ad Creative AI, and it
All right, everyone. Welcome to today's broadcast. brought to you by the last couple of days, which have been literally a roller coaster. So up and down and everything in between. So today, let's kind of talk about my thesis behind what we're doing, where we're going, how we're doing it, and why, and everything in between. Remember, if you have questions, drop those in the chat so that way I can answer them. I'll come back here and I'll go through the chat to make sure I've got everything down. We got some comments already. We're hyped. Like, let's go, Tony Stark. Finally, I can learn how to trade. Exactly. I got your back, got you covered. So make sure if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you like the broadcast and subscribe to the channel. And make sure if you're not following me on Twitter, you head over to Twitter and you go to Chandler SAF, which is my Twitter handle, and follow me there. I do put a lot of my kind of what I'm doing, what I'm investing, some random stuff, and kind of my thoughts on the market, what's going to pump, what's happening, why, and all that. So you can get a bird's eye view of that. And then, of course, on my broadcast, you can get that info as well. So let's get this party started. Who's ready for the market action today? It was pretty crazy. We had an insanely good day yesterday, and then we had an insanely bad day today. And one thing that I noticed that was actually quite interesting in the markets before we get into everything is crypto has been decoupled from stocks recently. But what's interesting now is after yesterday, crypto now coupled with stocks, it moved the exact same way stocks moved. And so when we go to stocks, we kind of look at the SPY and we look at on the chart that actually matters. What I thought was quite interesting was when we zoom in, SPY kind of had a shit show of a day too. So it was like, it pumped in the beginning, then it got rejected off some resistance, went all the way back down. Same thing as Bitcoin, up all the way down, all the way back up. So now when we come back here and we look at the Bitcoin chart, it's pretty similar to what happened with stocks. We had a more pronounced move, but we had the initial kind of pump, then we had a massive dump because crypto moves a lot better. Then we had the literal same candle that was on SPY right here. Then we did the same thing that SPY did. We came back down and then the same thing. I mean, look at this. Look at the similarity here, especially this part. We had the pump, the dump, the pump back up, the dump, and the pump. And now let's go check out stocks. It's funny how when the markets start coupling, even though it seems bearish, it's actually quite bullish because then Bitcoin's going to follow the markets, which means that people are now more risk tolerant. So it means they're going to come into crypto. So when we look at this chart, it's kind of the same deal. We had the same little pump. We had the dump right here. This candle, we came back down, pumped back up. So it was a really interestingly similar structure that the SPY and the indexes had, that Bitcoin had. So I think it's interesting that these things might be coming back up and sort of coupling together. When I look at the indexes, SPY had a pretty good week overall. When we look at what happened in the markets, I mean, it's hard to say that this is a bad week. Like last week, we had a good week and it turned red instantly on the last day. But to this week, where we were kind of crushing it. So it's been just up only markets. When we look at Heikin Ashi, which I like to look at a lot, you can see the trend. The trend is green. It's been very green, which probably means we're due for some sort of correction. I mean, the weekly looks fine. When we look at coming down to the 4 hour, we're starting to maybe get some divergences and some issues here that might have to play out. Maybe next week will be pretty choppy. Today was pretty choppy, so it wasn't really a good day to trade or anything. Even you look at like Apple, we've had this nice little long-term trend line. Let me turn some of this stuff off. It's just noise. So when we have this trend line, it's been riding quite well with Apple. Let's go to the daily. We've been on top of this trend line. So it's like touch, drive, touch, drive, touch, drive. Every time it touches it, it drives back up. It's been staying pretty tight to it. So now after the last couple of weeks, we bounced and then we came back up. I would say next week, either we push and we touch, but it seems to be still in a decent structure, at least on the daily and the longer term timeframes for Apple and a lot of the tech stocks. So the thing is that's important here is if stocks and the tech stocks and the NASDAQ and SPY keep pushing, if they're going to recouple with crypto, that's good for crypto because that means that as they push, crypto is going to push. It's going to do the exact same thing. It also tells me that institutional money is starting to really dive in because institutional money is the primary driver of how these updrives are created. So if that continues to move up, then I think we have a good case for crypto continuing to be bullish. Like you look, Meta, it's still got a great trend line. When they start to get this far off, they're due for a correction to the trend line, which is a buying opportunity. So when we look at a lot of these, they all look fairly good. They're all quite up only. When we look at like the 4-hour chart, we're starting to see these like downtrends play out, but getting broken. So we'll kind of see what next week looks like. But that's one thing I wanted to show y'all is if we're looking at tech stocks, especially SPY, and we can see, oh man, I just ruined my trend line. But if we can see like a good uptrend, then what we can do is we can kind of say, okay, this is probably what crypto is going to follow if it's now going to recouple. So interesting thing to pay attention to. So if you watch anything, look at the SPY because it's going to be kind of the composite of all the big tech stocks. Outside of that, I think at the same time, if you're exposed to crypto, I think there's a couple of things that you would be quite interesting to be exposed to at the same time, which would be Marathon, Digital Riot. I think these two especially. Look at this. That looks better than the freaking Bitcoin chart. So I mean, Bitcoin has the one drive and then sideways action, then a death puke. But when we go back and we go and look at these like Riot and Marathon, MicroStrategy even, these sometimes the return on these is better than Bitcoin itself. I mean, look at that. That looks way better than Bitcoin, doesn't it? We have no sideways action. You could just buy calls, buy calls, buy calls, buy calls. And then at some point the music stops. But I mean, look at where we're at in comparison to where we've been before. Big resistance, 1863. What are we coming into? Resistance at $20. Where do we go after that? Resistance at $28. Then where do we go after that? Maybe like 32. But like the potential for these to outperform Bitcoin is actually quite high. And when you look at these on the long-term idea, in comparison to like the quote unquote bull run we were in last year or in November 2021, we are here, we're at the bottom of this part. And then that pushes us to here, the 28s. Then that pushes us here to 37. I mean, the top of this was like the 50s and 60s. So you do have the opportunity to sometimes outperform Bitcoin in terms of how these move. Same thing with Riot. It's been just up only lately. So it's something to pay attention to. If someone wants exposure in the stock market and they don't know what to buy, but they are in crypto and they want exposure to crypto over here, then I think Marathon and Riot are two really good options. Obviously, this whole thing's not financial advice. I'm just some guy on the internet that people call Tony Stark. But MicroStrategy too, these charts look great. They look better than Bitcoin itself. Like MicroStrategy has the potential to, right now we're kind of stuck in this chop, but then we push to like 492. Then we push to like 568. Then we push to 635. I mean, the potential for massive growth on these is quite large as well. So something to pay attention to. The other one is Coin. Coin obviously came out with a bang and just got absolutely annihilated. But now Coin, it's at 104. I think if Coin gets down to, it's just been on an absolute tear, which tells me there's like institutional buying. But if Coin starts to develop a trend, then we've got a pretty good opportunity to come in here, because when you look at this dump, this was just like straight catastrophic dumping. So Coin's next big like resistance zone on the weekly is like 160, 158, like 165-ish. So some options there if people want exposure outside of crypto. Stocks and the indexes have been performing quite well. So when we look at like the RSIs, there's nothing super concerning. I mean, look at that. That's absolutely insane. I bought calls and then I bought calls and then I bought calls. It didn't even matter. You just keep going and it just keeps going up. Eventually, obviously, it's going to correct at some point. So we have to pay attention to that when we look at like the daily charts and stuff like that. And we start seeing this like up only start turning into a little bit of a bearish drive. Then we get either buying ops and we bounce off the 50 and come back up. But for the most part, stocks are looking quite solid. So let's take a look at the comments, see if there's any chats in here. Can you guys see my Monday opening going to be? Yeah, Monday opening is going to be absolutely just insane. It's going to be crazy how it opens and what it looks like. So let's see. Make sure if you can see my screen, just to double check, just comment that you can see my screen down below. So that way I know everyone can see. Let me refresh my broadcast. We'll see. Monday opening. Oh yeah, I can see my screen. All right, we're golden. We are golden. Okay, so let's get into crypto. Like, what is going on and why is it so insane? First, let's get into kind of charts and prices and stuff like that. Let's take a look at the last 7 days so we can zoom out a little. We're down 0.14%, which means we went up a lot and went down a lot. We didn't really do anything. ETH is up 3%. When we look at BNB's even up. XRP 54%. The catalyst of XRP's court decision was the thing that drove this entire market up. I think it even drove the stock market up. It literally drove everything up. So everything is up. Everything's just absolutely crushing it right now. Solana, Polygon. So Solana got crushed when then the SEC decided that it was a security. Polygon too. And now that decision came out, these went absolutely nuts. And I've often said that these layer ones will be the ones that perform well. So you look at Solana, 23%. You say Polygon, 17%. Let's go look at Avalanche, 13%. So these are the ones that drive. And the other things that I've talked about quite a bit are Stellar. If XRP moves, Stellar moves. So that's why Stellar's moving. When we look at, let's see, there was DeFi. The other one that I like a lot is DeFi coins. So when we look at Aave, it's up 8%. Aave's coming up off, I think I picked Aave up around like 68. So Aave's was up quite a bit. And then we look at Optimism and a layer 2, 15% up. So these are the big ones that are going to be the big performers because they have a big use case that people are actually paying attention to. Phantom was up quite a bit and then got shut right back down. Synthetics, 32%. That's DeFi. So I've talked about Synthetics before. It went from like $2.20 to like $3 at the high during the last run, and it's still sitting at 278. So these are all really good opportunities to jump into. And I think alts as a whole are starting to look a lot better. Compound, another DeFi token, 23% up. I think ETH DeFi it doesn't get enough love, and ETH DeFi tends to crush it. Let's take a look at some of the charts for these. Like when we go back into crypto, let's look at Bitcoin first. Actually, let's just close this one. And we'll come in here and we'll get into the crypto stuff. So when we look at crypto as a whole, this is where we're at. This is just absolutely disgusting to show. But here's the range we've been stuck in since, we entered this range. We'll leave Heiken Ashi for a second. We entered this range Friday, June 23rd. And guess what? We're back in this range. Nothing has ended. We are still stuck here. I think what's going on is we're kind of sandwiched in here until a decision on the ETF is made. So once the ETF decision comes out, if it's positive and it gets approved, it's going to send this thing to 34, 36, 37. If it's negative and gets disapproved, we probably push back down to like 26, 28.5-ish, or maybe even this little zone right here at the top, 27.7. I have a trend line over here. So when we look at, when we zoom out on this, the trend line's down here. So it sends us to like 28.5, 28.7-ish, or it pushes us up to like the 34 zone, and then we push back down to like the 30s. So that's kind of what's going to happen. And I think a lot of it's, look at this. We cannot clear this 34,000, like 400 to like 578 zone, which is no matter what we do, we were above it. And now we got catastrophically destroyed below it. And now we're going to close this daily today, probably below it. So that's a huge problem. A lot of people wanted to take longs today, and it was like straight up and straight. It was a disaster. I took a long yesterday and rode up, and it was a pretty good long, but I wasn't really into it today because it was just too choppy and too much of a sort of a shit show to jump into. Same thing with ETH. One of the things we want to look at for ETH, there was a nice little zone up here. So ETH had a really good long from 1881 up to about 2015. I was able to long this, and then I hit this. And I wanted to kind of show this because I think it was an interesting long. What happened on this one was I stopped out of a long I had over here. Actually, I think I was on BTC. And then I started looking at how impulsive ETH was looking. So then I kind of waited and waited. I mapped out and I put this in the dude server where this support was. And so I saw this bounce and I did not enter here. Like I don't enter on the bounce because then it's just jumping on a falling knife. It could fall through and you end up in chop and you end up dead. So what I did was I waited for it to go here, and I didn't enter here either because this isn't a confirmation for me. What I wanted to see was this V-shaped recovery. And then I also wanted to see this crossover. So then what happened was I saw the crossover happen like right here. I saw it coming up. I saw the V-shaped recovery. I saw the RSI starting to move to the crossover. And so I got in right here in this this candle right here, right after this red candle, because that told me, okay, we had a bounce. We had a confirmation of a green off of the support. And then the actual confirmation would have not been this one for me. It would have been this one, because that one confirmed and closed above the candle that bounced off the support. So that told me, okay, it might be safe to enter here. So I entered here and I set a stop loss that was just like right below this. So like 1971. Then we pushed up to this zone. And so once we pushed past 1992 and we were at like 96, I moved my stop loss right here to 92. Then once we pushed past this zone here, and we were up here, I moved my stop loss to just below here. And then as this got real choppy and we started getting rejected, I closed out my trade. So I closed somewhere around over here-ish. And then we ultimately died. So I just thought that was an interesting case study. So something you want to pay attention to is it's not about catching the bottom. It's also not catching the double bounce. It's catching the confirmation that actually puts you into a decent trade. I mean, when we look over here, you could have sort of construed, but there's a ton of chop here, so I didn't really want to throw anything out. You could have construed that, okay, this was sort of a chop zone that we cleared that should have became support. We fell through it, and then bounced around. So technically, you could have said, okay, on the 15, this is only the 15. Let's say we wanted to confirm on the 4 hour, it would have been like, okay, we closed above, and then this one was below. So it would have been too late on the 4 hour, but if we technically wanted to catch this one, what we could have done is said over here, okay, we entered it, we fell through, we pushed up, that's not a confirmation. We fell through, pushed up, not a confirmation, fell through, right here fell through, then fell through and closed below this candle. That's a confirmation. So then I could have said, okay, well, I guess off the 15-minute candle, that's a confirmation that I could enter this trade somewhat safely. Then I could have been like, okay, oh, wait, we're going great. Oh, roller coaster. Oh, no, we're all going to die. And then it comes back down. So it actually follows through. So that's kind of a good case study of where a nice confirmation would have been for this trade. And even if you were like, okay, that's shifty, I kind of just want to wait it out, you could have been like, okay, let's just keep waiting. This one closed below. This is another confirmation. Okay, still no. You'd have a couple opportunities to actually push into this. And then even if you caught this, you still would have been fine in this trade. So sometimes the 15 looks decent in confirmations. What we're looking at now is we might be coming up on sort of a double bounce like I saw before. It's still pretty sketchy. I'm not sure if it's something I want to be in. I'll kind of make that decision. We did have a nice crossover. I did like it that we bounced here, pushed through. So if we were waiting for the confirmation, which was kind of what I was looking at on this line, I would have said, okay, close below, close below. Okay, confirmation. Oh, never mind. Okay, close below. Okay, confirmation. Oh, never mind. So it's kind of the same situation. Like, which one of these confirmations are you going to actually follow? When I look at like if we look at the hour, which confirmation was actually the one that did it? So when we get into the higher time frames, it's more, you have a higher point of confluence that your confirmations are going to be correct. So like when you look at the hour here, it's nope. When you look at here, close below, then it came into a little double bounce and then got rejected and died. So ultimately the hour was a little bit better. When you look at like the 2 hour, it's like, okay, we had a close below here. If we were saying this is the big support, we had a close below, but this one did not close below that line. So then we kind of just went, and then this one did, but then this one did close below. So then you could have said, okay, well, off the 2 hour, I could have entered this long somewhere on this candle and probably been okay and be in profit. I can take profits down here. So something to pay attention to. Sometimes when you're taking confirmations off the 4 hour, you might miss the trade. If this one were to close below here, we would have had a catastrophic dump all the way down here probably. So just things to pay attention to. I think confirmations off the 4 are going to be the most accurate, but I think you can also get away with good confirmations off the 2, because even if you have this one confirms below and you enter on this candle, that's still a beautiful short. I mean, that's from 1961. That's a money short. That's doing well, even off like 3x leverage. Let me see if there's any questions. Take a look at Algo. All right, let's check out Algo. I think I have it in here somewhere. Okay, so one thing I like to look at on Algorand is I first like to look at the big charts so we can see if there's any sort of like movement for this thing, if it looks decent. And to me right now, it still looks like pure trash. I'd like to see this starting to lean this direction. Once the weekly gets near the 50, that's when I start to get really comfortable with buying, or even the 3-day. Right now, this kind of tells me that it tried right here and then it got destroyed and rejected. So then what this tells me here is it's going to keep doing this, and I don't want to catch that falling knife. So if it comes up and touches again and gets rejected, I just don't want to play that game. So I want to wait till we get a nice actually a nice decent follow through. So when we look at the 3-day, what I look at on this one is it looks a little bit better. So it looks like the 3-day might be starting to turn around a little bit. So we saw the 3-day here on this candle, looks like it bottomed out and then it started like a nice little V-shaped recovery, kind of topped out, starting to get a little divergence. And then now it's hit the bottom and it's starting to push off. So obviously today's movement absolutely destroyed everything. But if it can keep doing this, if the next 3-day candle is here and the next 3-day candle is here, then all of a sudden this starts printing like this. And then we get closer to that 50 line and I get more comfortable with it, which will also impact the weekly and make it look better. When we look at the daily, it's a similar story. So we had a nice recovery here, finally bottomed out. And then the nice recovery happened right here where we had the nice cross and then we hit the top and then push back down. So now what's going to happen here is it's either going to bounce and push back up to test this. And if the market conditions are right, it'll push through, or it's going to bounce and come back up to test and fall through, or it's just going to fall straight through. So for me, I still wouldn't want to play with this until I see this come up here and have a good confirmation and a bounce, at least off the daily, if not better on the 3-day. That would tell me that algo is a decent buy. So for me right now, it would be a no-go. It's not a no-go for forever, obviously, but it's a no-go until I can see good points of confluence. Let's take a look at something that is getting close, like Matic, for example. Looking at Matic on the weekly, we have a nice crossover. So check it out. We had the absolute dump bottom when the SEC said Matic was a security. So 50 cents. And then Matic kind of started pushing back through. Then we had that bullish news and Matic pushed up. So then what Matic's doing now is it's crossing over here on the weekly, which to me is a great sign. If we can get up to the 50, that's a momentum change that makes Matic bullish long-term and it gives us the potential to come up here and retest some of these bigger moves up in the 150s where it was at. So when we look at this on the 3-day, same story. So check it out. We're getting here. We're moving up. Matic is crossing the 50 on the 3-day. And if it does cross and push, even if it bounces and pushes, that'll carry over to the weekly. And that tells me that Matic is going to be a monster buy pretty soon. So whenever we cross that 50 line, like look at the 3-day, the last time we crossed it, we pushed from, looks like we crossed it right here-ish. Even if at the top, it was 87 to about like 156. So those crosses are incredibly bullish. And then when we look at the daily, even after today's horrific day, we still have a nice uptrending structure for Matic that seems to be pushing it up. So this will catch up, this will touch, it'll use it to bounce, or obviously Bitcoin falls through, we'll just fall through and die. So that's another good one. Sol is another story, similar. So Sol was right here. So notice Sol, as soon as that news came out, Sol, it got rejected here. And then we hit that bounce and then it had the recovery, had the cross here. And then on the weekly now we're crossing over. So that tells me that Sol, as long as it holds above that 50, it's going to have a bullish momentum change. And so that's kind of what I look for. When we look at Sol, even previously, when Sol crosses that, Sol's fairly new. When we crossed that, like we bounce off the 50, we bounced, and that put us into like full-blown bull mode up here. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And when you look at where it's at now, people are like, oh, but it's up so much. Well, it's not really. Look at it. If we zoom out, it's a tiny little speck of a candle on this monster of a chart that we have for Sol. So it's not even close to being where it could be in terms of like a full bull. So that's kind of what I look at with some of these coins. Let's see anything else. I'm a noob trading. How do you predict it? Is there a pattern there? So patterns are kind of king in the market. I mean, when we look at like Bitcoin, what I look at I kind of just look at momentum. I like to look at the RSI and see what the momentum looks like. So on the weekly with Bitcoin, it's like decent momentum, pushing through. I mean, we don't look horrible on the weekly. We kind of peaked out here, fell through. We're resetting. We had a reset. We pushed. Now we're coming through here. We either push off here and drive. So we kind of look at patterns across the board. So when we look at when we're here at the RSI, when it starts falling below that 50, that was the end of the bull market, or technically that part. We had this divergence. So high, lower, dead. So you could have kind of predicted what's happening based off what that looks like. Obviously, it's a lagging indicator. So we would have saw this, and we really probably wouldn't have known or paid attention to it till somewhere like right here where that's actually printed. And you can say, okay, that's a rejection. Maybe it's time to get out of this market. So that's what I look at. You look at these patterns, look at the last bull market. When we started really driving, we hit rock bottom, which I think that was the COVID crash. And then we pushed above the 50, retested, pushed, fell, retested the 50, and then we pushed back up, and that gave us strength for the whole bull market. So that's kind of what I look at. It's patterns, and it's the way these sort of coins and things move. I also look sort of at trends. So I drew this trend line here, which tells me that the trend is up. So when I zoom out, it's like, okay, we fell and then we went sideways forever. And then we pushed, wicked off this trend line, pushed, found some resistance, pushed through, hit the top of this trend line, went all the way back down to the bottom of it. And now we're pushing here. We found this resistance. And so if we're following the same pattern, it's push, top trend line. So it's push, top trend line, fall back down. So that's kind of what I pay attention to. If we fall out of this trend line, then I know that we're going to have a nice dump to this like long-term line. If we push above it, then we start going like parabolic. And that's when I know that the top is sort of near. All right, drop any questions you have. The other things that I think we can expect short term, let's look at the 15-minute. Short term for us right now, we're kind of getting absolutely hammered. We did wick off of this support right here. I think it wants to be bullish. Like everybody wanted to take a short here. And I kind of called what a short would look like in dudes, but we just didn't get a good confirmation. I mean, let's look at the hour. Even on the hour, it was like, okay, technically this could have been a confirmation, but then it pushed straight back up. So it had like a little V-shaped recovery. So then you start thinking long, but then you're like, okay, well, what? And then this one, okay, so technically the 4 hour or the 2 hour confirmation would have been this candle. So you would have shorted this candle. Then you see that monster wick back up and you get out. So it's kind of challenging to be able to mark when the actual short should happen because it was literally just straight up and down. And now when I look at maybe the long, what I'm kind of looking for is I'm looking for this candle, the 2 hour, which closes in 23 minutes to print, and then another one to print above this one. And if that prints above, then it gives me the confluence to take a long and kind of move back up to check out where we're headed next. So this same thing, if it pushes and then we clear this 30,500 zone, which is a major resistance point, then it would give me the confidence that we could bounce and push to at least 3182, which then we would need to push and go right back up. So there's a lot of chop on the way now, as you can see that we have. So trading chop is quite challenging. And this is where most people get wrecked. But I think you kind of have to just pay attention to these trend lines and say, okay, if I'm trading chop, then what I want to do is I just want to find this is the bottom, and then I just long to the top, and then I put in a short with a quick stop, or I make a thesis that a long is going to happen if we can confirm over these lines. But ultimately, it appears the 2 hours starting to turn over. It looks like this coin wants to be, it wants to be so bullish. It wouldn't let go. It wouldn't give up. Same thing with ETH. We're starting to see this little like wick over. When we go to the lower time frames, like the 15, we can already start to see a little bit of a recovery. So if we're on the 15 here and on ETH, for example, we're confirming above this resistance zone. So these are good signs. This doesn't mean it's going to be 100% correct, but it means we are moving in the right direction. And so if this can clear over the 50, it gives us the momentum change we need to create at least some sort of a recovery drive. When we look at like the 2 hour on ETH, it's not closed yet, but if we close above this line and we close above this candle, then it puts us in a pretty good zone for something to print that looks a lot better. When you look at Heiken Ashi, I kind of like it a lot because you can see, okay, bad trend change. 1, 2, 3. Okay, good trend change. Okay, let's long. We don't have that here. So on the 2 hour, when we look at even the 15-minute, it's like, it's harder to tell. So like right here, it's like, okay, bad. Okay, green. Okay, trend change, long. You could have got wrecked here. It's like 1, 2, 3. Oh, trend change. Nope. 1, 2, little candles. So we want to wait till we start seeing these like nice beefy candles, because that's when we know that we could have a decent trend change coming. Like here, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe one more above this line. We have a decent trend change to make an inference off of. Some stuff that I'm looking at, I did pick up Aave and LDO, if I can find them. I grabbed LDO when I saw, here's a good example. I saw on the daily that LDO was starting to turn over, that it was turned over quite well. And then what I saw on the weekly or the 3-day, I thought I saw it was coming close to this 50 zone, which it did. I actually picked it up right here, somewhere around like 189, where I have an alert. And then it pushed back through. It did get rejected, but then it bounced off that and it stayed above the 50. So above the 50 on the 3-day tells me that it's going to be in a good sort of at least a decent spot to push through for long. And now it's sitting at 223. So it's not a horrible spot. Unless Bitcoin collapses, then everything will just die. So same thing here. We crossed over on that weekly on the 50 and we're having this bullish crossover. So it tells me that there's some good juju for that coin. Same thing with Aave. When I was looking at this one, it was like, okay, start off with the daily. What do we look like? So I picked it up around like 68. It's like right here. I felt like it was getting pretty close. So 68, it was way over on the daily. So it was looked decently well. And then we go to the 3-day. And when we look at the 3-day, it was when I picked it up around that 68 zone, like right here, we were getting that crossover on the weekly. So I was like, okay, this is a pretty good pickup because we're actually crossing over, which is going to create those God candles and push us. And then when we look over at the weekly now, when I picked it up, it was somewhere like right, it was just crossing over. Now it's pushing through. So it tells me it was a decent pickup and it could be potential good opportunity. So that's kind of what I look for, just looking for momentum changes in the market based off what the RSI says and based off what the charts look like and ultimately how we're driving and where we're driving. I think if you can use momentum like that, it puts you in a good spot. And then you can draw little trend lines and kind of recognize and understand long-term where we're headed and why. Sol right now is a long-term trade. Yeah, I think for Sol, as long as Sol, especially like on the weekly and like the 3-day, and I'm not saying to go just like ape into it, but if Bitcoin can hold structure, Sol's great. I mean, right now, the big chop zone would have been between 14 and like 24. So if we can push past that, if we can stay and get past this 2632 zone, that gives us enough strength at least to push to like 27 and then drive straight through to 30. So then we get in the 30 chop and then that pushes to 36. So yeah, I think Sol, let's look on the weekly. It's got that nice crossover. It looks like it's in a really good position to make a big run. Sol and Matic's almost there. Matic's on the watch, but Sol I think is already there and it looks like it's in a pretty decent zone. When I look at weekly chop along the way, we're right here coming into this chop next. So it's like 29, we clear that, that pushes us to 32, we clear that, that pushes us to like 39, we clear that, that pushes us to like 44. And then if we clear 44, Sol goes to 51, 58, 74. So it kind of starts to trend. Obviously, it doesn't trend straight up, but gives it the opportunity to move up as long as it stays above. The thing that I like to check and pay attention to is like the 3-day trend. So if I see the 3-day trend starting to go like this, I'm not worried until it hits and it bounces and falls through. Then I kind of want to start thinking about getting out of my position. So that's kind of how I look at what Sol is doing and the positions it in. And in the last stream I talked about, and you should probably watch it if you haven't, but we came through, we pushed here. Notice how we did push, we came up and then we fell straight through. And then when we fell through, we hit the bottom, we hit the other bottom. This isn't the buy point, but for me, it would have been like, okay, oh, there it is again. Okay, maybe right here. And then we got rejected, and then we got rejected, and then we got rejected, and then we got rejected and rejected until we hit this bottom again, and then finally pushed through a lot of that fluff that was there. All right. So if you're getting some value out of this, just drop value in the comments below. If you have any questions for me, drop those in the comments below as well, so I know that you're here. Let me know if you have any other questions for me or anything you want me to cover, coins you want me to look at. I think from a perspective of macro, the BNB looks like trash. Mana's starting to get there, starting to turn over. I think Litecoin looks, if Litecoin hits and bounces, it's fantastic. I don't think it's a real bad deal. So for me, Litecoin, let's look on the daily after today. But yeah, for me, Litecoin's good until we get to like, I actually probably like to see it bounce off of this and not fall through before I think about getting it into If I can see this bounce and push, then we're in another good zone. So that's what I would be looking for, because this candle was great, but then this candle was awful. For me, optimism is getting there. See, it has the crossover. And then we're not quite there on the 3-day, so it's premature. So I would want this to cross over here. And then I would want to start seeing that weekly crossover before I would start trying to make any sort of big commitment to optimism. AVAX, same position. We need a little bit more. I think it's there on the 3-day. It's just there. So this is like a pay attention to it buy zone. So what I would do on this one is I would basically pay attention to it crossed here. If it comes down and falls through, I would just liquidate before I get wrecked. Atom's getting close. Phantom, def not close. Axes is getting near it. So Axes is pushing closer. Comp, I think, is great. Just look at comp, and it bounced. Like, comp is in such a good position. Let's even clear this next. I think if comp can stay above this 65 zone, it goes to 90. It just looks good. When we look at the weekly, this is a DeFi token. I love these DeFi tokens. Weekly, it's crossed over a long time ago, bounced, and now it's pushing back up. Aave, similar story. Another ETH DeFi token for like lending. But we see Aave crossover on the weekly, kind of tested, and then it pushed through. So it has these nice little candles. SNX, another one, similar story. It got rejected and then pushed through. So now if it bounces, we have a good spot. If it comes back and falls through, obviously, then we have a problem. Maker, similar story. Just want to make sure Maker doesn't catastrophically collapse after today. Uni's getting there. Like I talked about, Lido looks like it's in a good spot. So there's a lot of things in really good spots. Link is just now crossing over. When we look at the 3-day, it looks decent. It's still going. Link is probably one of the worst performing coins I've ever seen in the entire market. So I'm kind of careful not to take big positions in Link. During the bull run, it barely moved. Say, thanks for the live streams. Yeah, happy to help out. Let me know if you have any more questions. That's kind of where I think the market is. Overall, I think we're in sort of a transition zone. We really needed to, I would have really liked us to hold above like this 31,095 zone. I mean, look at all these wicks: rejection, 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 rejection. It just legit can't get, it won't go below 30,144, and it will not hold above 31,047. This is sort of like sideways action. It kind of tells me there might be some manipulation holding it down until that ETF decision comes through, because that will be the bullish catalyst to push. So that could be something that's happening, because it's just become such a strong zone for us to not be able to push through. So it's like every week we get close, we get pushed down, get close, get pushed down, get close, get pushed down. So it's just sort of stuck in this zone between 31,000 here and down here. So that's where the macro market looks like. It doesn't look horrible. I do think if we lose, when we go to the daily, I do think if we lose like this 30,122 zone, I called this on a long, but then also like pay attention to 29,920, because there's some decent wicks there. Ultimately, if we lose this 29,930 zone, there's not much left holding us up. So we've got 29.6, we've got 29.4, then we push to 28.3, then we push to like 27.7. Like I talked about, if we draw this on like a long-term sort of trend line of where we're at, with this little trend we've been following, if we get rejected there and we push down, that takes us down to like 28.5, 28.2. And I put this inside the dude's Discord for everybody to see and kind of recognize where we're at and what we're doing. So that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say. I hope you all enjoyed this. Let's see. What are the best trades right now for people with small liquidity or small budget around 25? I think if someone has small budgets, and this isn't financial advice, and you're kind of working off small liquidity, you don't want to go YOLO into like Pepe and stuff, because it's easy to lose all your liquidity and just get completely wrecked. Honestly, for me, if people have a low liquidity and they don't have a lot to play with, I would just play an ETH. It's going to have more upside than Bitcoin, more downside too, but it's also going to be a great performer when the actual bull market starts. you could probably just trade ETH. I mean, if you want to be ultra conservative and you don't want to lose your liquidity, Bitcoin's always the best option. But I think ETH is another good option because it's fairly stable. It has more downside than Bitcoin when Bitcoin collapses, but it also has the ability to create more liquidity. So that's kind of where I'm at when we're looking at the trades right now. If I'm going to go into something like this, this would have to be, it's kind of a double bottom play, bottom, bounce, bottom, bounce. Getting to the point to where I may consider a long, and the long would just, we're going to have some resistance there, but the long would just push me to like right there, maybe take profit. But for me, it's like, these are really just shitty confirmations. So I'm probably going to wait to see like a nice 2-hour confirmation before I make any sort of decisions. We have 9 minutes left. And then if this one prints up here or it prints above this candle, then it would give me some more confluence. Looking at Heiken Ashi, we still look like trash on the 2-hour. When we look at the 15, it's looking better. It's kind of flattening out. I would like to see this print higher at some point instead of just flat prints. But it's pretty much where I'm at. When we look at Bitcoin, same story. We're getting these prints and then all of a sudden now reds. Now this is chop. I really don't like playing in chop. So for me, it's like, no. Well, I guess if we had confirmation of Heiken Ashi right here, it would have been here, confirmation, short, and then get out, chop, 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 chop until we see a decent, at least, structure that starts uptrending. So that's it. That's all I've got to say. Hope y'all have a great day. I hope this was helpful. If you found this valuable, just drop a valuable down in the comments below and make sure you like and subscribe to the broadcast and follow me on Twitter.